The movie kicks off with a postman delivering letters to houses deep in a forest. He gets to a house where a woman is washing clothes stained with blood. He knocks on the door, but she doesn't hear him because her music is blasting. At that moment, the postman hears strange creaking noises coming from the basement. Thinking someone might be in trouble, he lifts the wooden cover and tries to help. Unfortunately, he's suddenly pulled inside by an unseen force. The story then jumps to 30 years later. A group of teenagers is heading to the forest for a camping trip called an offline vacation. Their parents sent them because they're hooked on the internet and gadgets. When they arrive, the manager welcomes them, saying this is their big chance to break their addiction and connect with nature. The 50 teenagers are split into teams, each with a guardian. They have to hand over their phones and get ready for the adventure. In a cabin in the forest, we see the same woman from 30 years ago, now much older. She's hunted a deer and is trying to drag it into the basement, sadly. She slips and falls into the basement. Moments later, a monstrous creature shows up and kills her instantly. Next, the teenagers are prepping for a 3-day hike in the woods. We see Counselor is his group, which includes 5 kids: quiet Zosha, athletic Daniel, carefree blonde Anelia, gamer Julik, and a gay boy named Bartek. Before they set off, a local priest arrives in a fancy car and greets everyone, he says. Modern technology is the biggest threat to kids and hopes this trip helps them overcome their addiction. He prays for them and even sprinkles holy water on their phones and laptops. Next, Izza's group heads out for camping. During the walk, Julik starts talking to Zosha, he says. Her necklace looks like the one from Terminator T-800. She laughs and tells him it's a family keepsake. Bartek keeps interrupting. Meanwhile, annoyed, Daniel tries to flirt comments about Bartek, but they start fighting, and Daniel pushes Bartek, hurting his leg. Luckily, the others step in and break it up. A bit later, Julik goes to pee and finds a torn-up deer and calls. That night, everyone goes to sleep, but Daniel can't rest. He heads to a nearby lake to smoke. Anelia joins him and they start talking and smoking. As they chat, Anelia finds out he's still a virgin. She decides to give him an unforgettable night and gets intimate with him. She decides to make it a memorable night and gets close with him. Afterward, Anelia goes back to her tent, while Daniel sneaks out a phone he had hidden. He starts browsing through a dating app, unaware that someone is lurking behind him. Suddenly, a huge man covered in boils appears and attacks Daniel. He ends up killing him by repeatedly slamming him against a tree. In the next scene, we see Zosha on a family road trip. Looking cheerful, she plays with her sister in the backseat while her dad takes a selfie with her mom because they're distracted. Their car gets into a fatal accident. Suddenly, Zosha wakes up from a nightmare, thinking her whole family died. Later, the group gets ready for another day of hiking, but they can't find Daniel. Everyone gets worried, and Anelia mentions seeing him at the lake last night. She explains they chatted before she went back to her tent. When they check the lake, they don't find him but spot bloodstains on a tree. Despite the panic, Izza assures them it's just tree sap. Then, she insists they split up to look for Daniel. Julik is scared, saying in horror movies, everyone dies when they split up. He suggests sticking together, but they ignore him. Izza, Zosha, and Julik head out to find Daniel, while the others stay behind. Soon, the trio arrives at the house from earlier. They go in for help but find no one. They explore and end up in the basement, where they find several bodies, including Daniel's. Before they can react, the huge man shows up, so they hide and lock the basement door. Julik almost throws up from the smell, but Izza stops him. Soon after, the killer enters the basement, and they try to escape through a window. Zosha and Julik manage to get out, but when Izza tries to leave, noticing Daniel's phone ringing, she's determined to grab it. She stays to confront the monster, but sadly, it's a mistake. Killer easily overpowers her, decapitates her, and throws her head at Zosha and Julik's feet. Meanwhile, Anelia and Bartek chat by the lake. He opens up about being gay in a homophobic town, and Anelia shares her own struggles, with people thinking she's not smart or respectable. As they talk, the killer suddenly appears and fatally strikes Anelia with a metal rod. Bartek flees and finds refuge at a church. Elsewhere, Julik and Zosha stumble upon a house in the forest and meet an old man. They tell him about the monster that killed their friends and ask for a phone to call the police, but the old man doesn't have one. He reveals he's the postman attacked 30 years ago, who lost his legs but escaped. He explains there are actually two killers, twin brothers who turned savage after finding a mysterious stone. Stone transformed them into carnivores, and their mother confined them to the basement. After hearing this, The old man suggests they stay because he has weapons and food. Julik agrees, but Zojia insists on taking action. She decides to retrieve Daniel's phone and call the cops, with Julik reluctantly following her lead. Meanwhile, Bartek runs into the priest and tells him everything. He asks for a phone, but the priest initially claims there's no signal. Suddenly, the phone rings, exposing his lie. The priest knocks Bartek out to silence him. After some time, Bartek wakes up to find himself tied to a chair and silenced. The priest sits before him, recognizing Bartek from last year and hurling insults about his sexuality. He condemns Bartek, claiming people like him are harmful. Hearing noises outside, the priest investigates and encounters the deformed killer, who crushes his skull. The killer uses a wood chipper to shred the priest's body. Inside the church, Bartek frees himself and hides in the confessional box, but the killer finds him. Meanwhile, the other two teens head to the killer's house to retrieve the phone. Julik distracts the killer with noise while Zojia sneaks into the basement. Before leaving, Zojia gives Julik a knife for protection and kisses him, boosting his confidence. Julik challenges the killer at the front door, attempting to fight him. Meanwhile, Zojia searches the basement for Daniel's phone and finds it, but the killer discovers her. As the killer seems about to attack Zojia, Julik arrives and stabs him, but it has no effect. The killer incapacitates Zojia and turns on Julik, viciously attacking him. While unconscious, Zojia dreams of the accident involving her family. She witnesses her father's desperate pleas for help, but she cannot save him. Suddenly, she wakes up in the basement, finding herself chained. She sees Julik nearby, wounded with a knife in his stomach. Desperately, she retrieves Daniel's phone from her pocket, but it dies out. Julik, in agony, asks her to end his suffering with tears in her eyes. Zojia reluctantly fulfills his wish, ending his pain. Using the knife, she frees herself from the chains. Initially, she considers fleeing through the basement window, but the memories of her friends compel her to confront the monsters. Armed with a machete she finds upstairs, Zojia decides to take revenge. In the room, she finds one of the twins sleeping and realizes the other is absent. Driven by rage, she attacks the sleeping twin, stabbing him until he stops moving. With determination, she escapes and flees into the forest. Meanwhile, the old postman hears a knock on his door, thinking it's the twins. He grabs his gun and shoots at the door, only to find Bartek's lifeless body outside. Tek, who had managed to escape, succumbed while trying to find help. Another part of the forest, Zojia runs for hours until she encounters a policeman. Traumatized, she struggles to explain the situation, but the officer senses her distress and comforts her. As they drive away, they encounter one of the killers on the road. Despite Zojia's warnings, the policeman investigates, believing someone is hurt. When the monster moves, the officer realizes the danger therein. He reaches for his gun, aiming to shoot, but before he can act, the killer swiftly strikes him with an axe, causing a fatal blow. With relentless force, the killer climbs onto the car, attempting to attack Zojia. However, she swiftly takes control, starting the car just in time. As the car lurches forward, it throws the monster off balance. Seizing the moment, Zojia runs him over multiple times until she's sure he's defeated. In the closing scene, two intoxicated individuals stumble upon the seemingly lifeless monster in the dark. To their surprise, he's still alive, rising from the ground. Back at home, it's revealed that his twin brother has also survived. From his bed, the surviving brother watches the flashing police lights outside, hinting at the continuation of the horror.